The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The braid sits in her palm like a dead thing. Ahsoka Tano stands at the top of the Jedi Temple steps, the great bronze doors sealed behind her, and she looks down at the coil of woven hair she's been carrying since the moment Plo Koon cut it free. 3 years of war. 3 years of dust, and blood, and 1,000 things the Jedi texts never prepared her for. And this is what she has left of it. This small, stupid thing in her hand. Coruscant sprawls below her in every direction, an endless skin of durasteel and light, speeders threading the canyons between towers, the city alive and indifferent to the girl standing at the top of its most sacred building with nothing left to show for herself. The wind is cold this high. She hadn't noticed the cold before. She takes the first step down. Anakin Skywalker catches up to her in 4 strides, his robe snapping behind him, his mouth already forming the beginning of an argument she doesn't want to have. She can feel it in the Force before he opens his mouth, the familiar heat of him, the urgency, the absolute inability to leave well enough alone. "Ahsoka, don't," she says. Not unkindly, just tired. "I know you're angry. I know what they did was, Anakin." She stops walking, doesn't turn around. "I know what you're going to say. I've been listening to you say it in my head for the last 6 hours. You're going to tell me the Council made a mistake. That they'll do better. That the Order is worth fighting for if I could just..." She exhales. "I can't. Not today." She takes another step. Then, another. He follows, and for a moment the only sound is their boots on ancient stone and the distant white noise of the city far below. He opens his mouth, and the world ends. It is not a sound. It is not a vision. It arrives the way a bone breaks, not the crack but the wrongness in the moment before, the body knowing something has already gone permanently wrong. Anakin Skywalker stops walking. The Force around him does not ripple or pulse or warn. It seizes. 23 years of memories that have not happened yet arrive all at once, not as images but as weight, the accumulated pressure of a life lived in darkness, loaded into a body that was never built to carry it. He feels the respirator before he remembers it. He feels the absence of his right hand before he looks down and finds it still there, still flesh, still warm. He feels the way a suit closes around you when you can no longer survive without it, every breath a mechanical reminder of what you cost the universe by being born. He feels Luke. He feels Leia. He feels Mustafar. Anakin Skywalker drops to his knees on the steps of the Jedi Temple, and he does not make a sound. Because Darth Vader learned a long time ago that no one is coming when you call. Ahsoka turns at the wrong moment. She's 3 steps below him when the Force signature behind her simply collapses, and what she spins around to find is her master on the ground, one hand braced against the stone. Head bowed, shoulders doing something she has never once seen them do. Shaking, she's beside him in an instant. Her hand finds his shoulder and she calls his name, and he doesn't answer, and the panic is climbing her throat until she presses her palm flat against his back and reaches out through their training bond. And stops. She has felt grief before. She lost Qui-Gon through Obi-Wan's absence at the bond. She felt the echoes of Geonosis, the deaths at Jabiim, the weight of every trooper she couldn't bring home. She knows what grief feels like in the Force. She does not know what this is. This is not recent grief. This is grief that has been calcified for decades. Grief that has learned to be structural. Grief that a man has spent so long standing on top of that he's forgotten he was ever standing on anything at all. It presses against her hand through his robe, and she almost pulls back from the sheer size of it. "Anakin," her voice comes out different than she intended. Quieter. "What is this?" He lifts his head. His eyes are dry. She'll realize later that this is the most frightening part. But his face looks wrong in the way that faces look wrong when the person wearing them has arrived from somewhere very far away. "I remember," he says. "Remember what?" He looks at her, and there is something behind his eyes she doesn't have a name for. Too old for his face, Too certain for a man who's always been certain of the wrong things. Everything, he says. Everything that was going to happen. He doesn't explain it cleanly. He's not capable of that right now. It comes out in fragments, in broken pieces, a suit he can't describe without his voice going wrong, children he somehow knows the faces of, a boy on a moon with twin sons, a daughter who carries herself like her mother and argues like him. A moment, this is the one he keeps circling back to. The one his body physically resists narrating, where the only good thing he managed to do in 20 years of doing nothing good was fall. One last time. She watches him while he talks. Not his words. Him, the shape of the force around him, which is still doing that wrong thing, still carrying that impossible weight. How long? She asks. When he falls quiet. What? How long were you, whoever that was? How long? The silence sits between them like a third presence. 23 years, he says. She breathes out slowly. Her eyes drop to the braid in her own hand, the braid she's been gripping through all of this, the knuckles pale around it. She opens her fingers and looks at it. A small, dead thing. A door closing. She looks back up at him. What happens to me? She asks. In this future, you remember. He meets her eyes. He doesn't look away, and he doesn't soften it, because Vader learned that softening things is just a way of making yourself feel better while the other person stands there bleeding. I don't find you again for a long time, he says, and when I do, I'm not the one looking. She understands what he's not saying. She's been a soldier long enough to read the shape of things left unsaid. The braid catches the wind and she lets it go. It spins once, twice, and then the updraft takes it and it rises instead of falling, carried up past them and gone. Ahsoka, she's already making the calculation. He can see it behind her eyes, the same thing she's always done, even at 14. Even the first day, take the situation apart, find the load-bearing pieces, figure out what holds and what doesn't. You're asking me to stay, she says. I'm asking you to. He stops. Starts again, and what comes out is nothing like the argument he had built in his head on the walk down the hall. What comes out is the truth, pulled up from somewhere below strategy and below pride and below anything he would have admitted yesterday. Ahsoka, please. His voice has an edge she hasn't heard before. Not anger, not urgency. Just age. I can't survive what comes next without you. It is not a thing Anakin Skywalker has ever said out loud. She hears it land. She feels it in the force around him. No artifice, no manipulation, no Jedi Knight performing vulnerability to get what he wants. Just a man who has already lived the version of this where she walks away and can't make himself perform acceptance of it again. She looks at him for a long time. Then she looks up at the temple, at the stone face of it, at the great doors that handed her back to a military tribunal without blinking. She looks at the braid that is no longer in her hand. She looks at the city below them, which offered no particular comfort when she descended into it, and will offer no particular comfort now. She sits down on the step beside him. Start from the beginning, she says. Tell me everything. The relief on his face is not the triumphant relief of a man who won an argument. It is something older and quieter than that. It is the relief of someone who has been afraid for a very long time, surfacing for the first time. He breathes in. He begins. 2 levels above them, a temple guard stands at a side archway with a clear line of sight to the steps. He watches a senior Jedi Knight sitting on the ground beside his expelled Padawan, and he watches the Padawan sit down next to him rather than leave, and he turns and goes to find someone to tell. The door closes behind him without a sound. They do not knock. The doors to the High Council chamber open inward, and Anakin Skywalker walks through them without breaking stride. And Ahsoka Tano walks half a step behind his left shoulder, and neither of them has been summoned. This is by itself enough to shift the temperature of the room. 12 seats arranged in a circle, 10 of them occupied. Mace Windu, Yoda, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, Shak Ti, Coleman Kakaj, Aegon Kolar, Saesee Tiin, Stas Ali, Kit Fisto, the War Council in all its diminished, wartime configuration. Morning light pours through the curved transparisteel windows, painting the chamber in pale gold that reaches no one. Outside, Coruscant turns beneath them. Indifferent, Mace Windu is already standing. Skywalker, the single word carries everything it needs to, the interruption noted, the breach of protocol filed, the patience present, but finite. His eyes move to Ahsoka for exactly 1 second, then back to Anakin. This session was not open to. I know, Anakin says. He doesn't stop walking until he reaches the center of the room, the open circle between the seats, the place where initiates stand to receive judgment, and knights stand to report, and Padawans stand to be told what their futures will look like. He stands there now and he is still, genuinely, completely still, in a way that Mace Windu's body registers before his mind does. Because in 11 years of knowing Anakin Skywalker, he has never once stood like that. Ahsoka stops at the edge of the circle. 1 step behind him, 1 step to the left. She says nothing. She doesn't need to. Yoda's eyes move to Anakin. They stay there. Padawan Tano was expelled from the Order on the 14th of this month, Anakin begins. His voice is even. Not flat. There's weight underneath it. But even, in the way that weight becomes even when it's been carried long enough to find its balance. Prior to her expulsion, no formal charges were filed within the Order. She was not notified of the proceeding until after the decision was made. Her rank insignia was removed before she was permitted to speak. No one interrupts him. She was then transferred to Republic military jurisdiction for prosecution on charges the Order's own investigation later proved fabricated. During the period of her detention, the Council possessed investigative resources that were not deployed on her behalf. He pauses. Not for effect. For precision. These are the facts of what occurred. Mace's jaw is set. Skywalker, I'm not finished, Master Windu. The room goes quiet in a different way than it was quiet before. Ki-Adi-Mundi shifts in his seat. Kit Fisto watches Anakin the way you watch a weather system that has changed direction without warning. Shakti is looking at the floor. Plo Koon is very still, his eyes on Ahsoka, and something in his posture carries the specific quality of a man absorbing a cost he helped levy without fully understanding what he was doing. The Jedi Code does not contain a provision for expulsion without trial, Anakin continues. It does contain a provision for emergency jurisdiction in wartime. And that provision requires the consensus of the full available council, not a handful of masters convened without full quorum. He lets that land. I've read the session records. The vote was not unanimous, and it was not sufficient. The silence this time has texture to it. Mace Windu steps down from his seat. He is a large man, and he moves like one, deliberate, physical, accustomed to occupying space, and having space organize itself around him. He crosses to the edge of the circle and stops there, 3 meters from Anakin, and for a moment the two of them simply look at each other. What is it, Mace says quietly, that you want from this council, Knight Skywalker? 2 things, Anakin says. Ahsoka Tano reinstated to her former rank, effective today, and her knighting, which was already overdue before any of this happened, completed before we leave this chamber. The sound Mace makes is not quite a laugh. You're aware, he says, that knighting requires a council vote, a ceremony, a period of Master Windu. Anakin's voice doesn't rise, doesn't sharpen, it simply stops accommodating. The council already owes Ahsoka Tano a debt it cannot repay in this room today. I am asking for the smallest possible fraction of what is owed. Reinstatement and knighting. Now. And if the council declines? Then I want a formal accounting of the procedural failures in the record, her record, so that, when this war ends and the historians look back at how the Order conducted itself, Ahsoka Tano's file says clearly what was done to her, and who did it. No one moves. Anakin doesn't move either. He is not trembling with suppressed anger, not clenching his jaw, not doing any of the things he has always done when a conversation reaches this point and the emotion overtakes the argument. He simply stands there, in the morning light, and waits. And the waiting is somehow more uncomfortable than the shouting would have been. At the far end of the chamber, Yoda has said nothing. He sits with his hands folded over his Geimer stick, and he watches Anakin Skywalker with the expression of a man who has pulled a thread and found it attached to something large he cannot yet see. In 800 years, he has learned to trust that sensation. In 800 years, he has also learned that there are moments when the Force shows you a shape without showing you what it means, and the worst thing you can do is pretend you understand it. Something is wrong with Anakin Skywalker. Not wrong the way darkness is wrong. There is no shadow in him today. No pull toward the breaking point he has always walked close to. What Yoda is sensing is something else, something heavier than darkness. A grief so old it has become load-bearing, structural. A grief that has been incorporated into the architecture of the man until removing it would require rebuilding everything. He has never felt this in Anakin before. He felt it, once, in a master who returned from a mission that cost him everything and said nothing of it for years. He felt it in the Force echoes left in places where too much had happened, and the stone still remembered. He has never felt it in a living person of Anakin's age. He does not say any of this. He files it away in the place he files things he doesn't yet have words for. And he watches, and he waits. Mace Windu turns to look at Ahsoka for the first time since they entered the room. She meets his gaze without flinching. She has good reasons not to flinch at Mace Windu anymore. She stood in a Republic courtroom and watched the case against her collapse, and watched the Council reassemble its posture as if it had never fallen. And she walked out of this building with her braid in her hand and her faith in the Order somewhere below the steps where she dropped it. She is not angry, standing here. She was angry yesterday, and the day before, and the 9 days before that. Today she is something cooler than anger. Today, she is a woman who has decided to come back into a room she was thrown out of. And the decision cost her something, and she is not pretending otherwise. Mace looks at her for a long time. Then he looks at Anakin. Then he looks at the room, at the seated masters, at the morning light, at the procedural facts Anakin has just laid across the floor of the chamber like evidence at a trial. The Council, he says, finally, moved too hastily. 4 words. Clipped, precise, offered without inflation. It is not an apology. It is the minimum acknowledgement available within the structure of his pride, and everyone in the room knows it, and Ahsoka decides, in this moment, that she will take it, and not spend another breath waiting for more. Plo Koon, Mace says. Would you retrieve the knighting saber from the reliquary? The ceremony is brief. It is supposed to be brief. The words are short. The gesture is singular. The weight of it is not in the length. Plo Koon returns with the ceremonial blade, and Ahsoka stands in the center of the chamber, and Mace Windu speaks the words that have been spoken in this room for 10,000 years. When the blade comes down, it does not touch her. It passes close enough that the displaced air moves across her montrals, and she hears nothing. And she is a Jedi Knight, and the word carries a different gravity than it did 10 minutes ago. She breathes in. She breathes out. Anakin says nothing. There is nothing to say. He watches her face in the second after, the second where the formal reality of the thing settles into the body. And something in his chest does a thing he will not name in front of the Council. He turns to leave. He does not thank the room. He does not address the masters individually or acknowledge Windu's 4 words as sufficient or insufficient. He turns, and Ahsoka falls in beside him, and they walk back toward the doors. Behind them, the chamber holds its silence. Yoda does not speak until the doors close. Then, very quietly, to no one in particular changed, he has a pause. Long enough that Ki-Adi-Mundi starts to assume the observation is complete. How, I cannot say. His eyes remain on the closed doors. Troubling, he adds, that, I cannot say. The scrambler is Rex's idea. He pulls it from a compartment in his kit that Ahsoka has never seen him open before. A matte black cylinder the length of his forearm, military grade. The kind of device that doesn't appear in standard issue manifests because it was never standard issue. He sets it on the table between them without explanation and activates it. And the sound it makes is nothing at all, which is how you know it's working. The transport cabin is small. 3 seats, a folding table, a viewport showing Coruscant's upper atmosphere at altitude. Rex takes the seat nearest the door by habit, the seat with sightlines to both exits, and sets his bucket on the table beside the scrambler, and looks at Anakin with the expression of a man who has followed orders across 3 years and 600 engagements, and is prepared to follow them further, but would like, this once, to understand what he's following. "Sir," he says, "you pulled me from a debrief. I know. General Kenobi is going to ask where I went. Tell him I needed you." Anakin sits across from him, forearms on the table. That's true. Rex looks at Ahsoka. Ahsoka looks at Anakin. The scrambler hums its silent hum, and the transport holds altitude. And no one says anything for long enough that the saying of it becomes its own kind of pressure. Anakin starts with Palpatine. Not because it's the easiest place to start, it's the hardest, but because everything else in the story is downstream of it. And he has learned, in a life that went wrong in ways he is still not finished processing, that you cannot build understanding on a foundation you haven't laid. So he says the name. The other name. He says it plainly, without softening, and he watches the two of them hear it. Rex's face does the thing faces do when a load-bearing wall turns out to be hollow, not collapse, but a kind of structural recalculation happening in real time, the body catching up to the mind. He was bred in a facility on Kamino for the specific purpose of serving the Republic, and the Republic's Supreme Chancellor is a Sith Lord, and those two facts are sitting in the same brain right now trying to find a configuration that makes sense. Ahsoka is very still. She believed him on the steps, mostly. Believed him the way you believe a person who has never lied to you and is clearly not lying now, even when what they're saying is impossible. But hearing Palpatine's name in this context, in a shielded room at altitude with Rex's scrambler between them, makes the belief settle differently. Heavier, real in a way that abstract horror is not real until it finds something specific to attach to. "How long?" she says. "The entire war," Anakin says. "Both sides. The banking clans, the separatist command structure, the treaty failures that made the war feel inevitable. All of it was architecture. He built the crisis that required the solution that required him." Rex says, quietly, "Sir. The chips. I'm getting there." He gets there. He describes Order 66 the way you describe something your body remembers before your mind does, not as a historical event, but as a sensory fact. The signal. The way the clone's eyes changed. The way it happened everywhere at once, across every theater of the war. A coordinated execution so total that the Jedi didn't have time to understand what was happening before it was over. Rex is looking at his own hands. They are steady. They are always steady. The hands of a man whose entire identity is built on steadiness under pressure, but something behind his eyes has gone very quiet. Ahsoka watches him and says nothing, because there is nothing to say to a man who is being told that his own body contains a mechanism built to make him kill the people he's spent 3 years keeping alive. "It's a chip," Anakin says, "inhibitor chip. It's in every clone, embedded during development on Kamino. Under normal circumstances it suppresses behavior the Kaminoans classified as a threat. Under the Order 66 signal it overrides higher cognition entirely. The trooper doesn't choose to comply. They aren't capable of choosing." Rex looks up. His voice is very careful. "Where is it?" he says. "Exactly," Anakin tells him. Rex nods once, slowly, and then he picks up his helmet from the table and looks at the inside of it for a moment and sets it back down. He doesn't say anything else. He doesn't need to. "The children," Ahsoka says. Anakin stops. "At the temple. You said, on the steps you said something about," yes, she lets the word sit. She's asking him to go there, and they both know it, and she doesn't withdraw the question. He tells her about Padam. He tells her without naming his marriage directly, old reflex, even now. But the shape of it is clear enough that naming it would be redundant. He tells her about the nightmares, and what the nightmares convinced him of, and what he did because of that conviction, and he tells it without breaking his voice, which costs him something she can feel clearly through the training bond. He tells her about the operating table. He doesn't tell her everything that happened there. Some of it has no words that work in normal language. But he tells her enough that she understands what the suit is, and why, and who put it on him. Ahsoka's hands are flat on the table. Her jaw is set in the way it sets when she is processing something that she will not allow herself to react to until she fully understands it. A habit she developed at 14 and never lost. Luke and Leia, she says. Yes, they survive. In the future you remember. Yes, and Padam? The silence is its own answer. She breathes through her nose. Once, twice, she looks at the viewport, at Coruscant's atmosphere, at the pale curvature of the planet below. I need a minute, she says. Take it. She takes it. Rex takes it with her, in the way that Rex takes most difficult things, by sitting very still and letting the difficulty occupy the space it needs without demanding that it perform resolution faster than it's capable of. Why do you believe him? Rex asks her. Eventually, he's not challenging. He's asking. The way Rex asks things, directly and without edge. Ahsoka considers the question seriously. His Force signature, she says. I've been reading it since I was 14. I know what it feels like when he's afraid, when he's angry, when he's hiding something. Right now, he's not hiding anything. She pauses. He doesn't know how to do that. Hide things in the Force. He's never needed to. His signature is too loud. But right now there's nothing underneath what he's showing me. No second layer. Rex looks at Anakin. Sir? She's right, Anakin says. I'm not built for deception, never was. Rex picks up his helmet again, turns it once in his hands, sets it down. The chips, he says. Can they be removed? Surgically, yes. Someone I know. Someone who was there when it mattered. Finds one and has it taken out. It can be done. He pauses. But I'm not going to remove them one at a time. Rex looks at him. There's a central network on Kamino, Anakin says. The chips are slave to a command architecture, individual and broadcast capable. The broadcast array has a physical isolation switch, a fail-safe the Kaminoans built in for emergency access. If I can reach that switch and trip the array into diagnostic mode, I can push a deactivation signal republic-wide. Every chip in every clone. Simultaneously, the quiet that follows has a different quality than the quiet before. It is the quiet of something large becoming possible. When? Rex says. Soon, before Palpatine realizes his timeline is in trouble. What do you need from me? A reason to be on Kamino that doesn't raise flags. A 501st inspection. Readiness assessment. You've done them before. Rex nods slowly. I'll arrange it. He's already thinking, already organizing the logistics in the part of his mind that has been arranging impossible things on short notice since Geonosis. Then he says, more quietly, how many of my brothers did I lose? In the future you remember. He's not asking about the war. Anakin understands the question. He answers it the only way he can, honestly, which means not answering it at all, because the number doesn't exist in a form that fits in a sentence. He looks at Rex, and Rex reads the look, and Rex nods once and looks back down at the table. All right, Rex says, after a moment. All right, the scrambler hums between them. Outside, the transport begins its descent arc, Coruscant rising in the viewport. 3 people in a shielded room, carrying between them the specific weight of a future that is no longer fixed, which is almost hope. Except that hope is lighter than this, and what they're carrying is something more durable. Ahsoka looks at Anakin. We're going to need a better lie than a readiness inspection, she says. Rex, you've never requested one unprompted. I can make it prompted, Rex says. The 501st has a training deficit report 3 weeks overdue. I file it tomorrow, flag Kamino as the resolution site, request General Skywalker as the supervising officer. He pauses. It's even true. The report exists. The corner of Ahsoka's mouth moves. This, she tells Anakin, is why you brought him. Rex allows himself nothing, but his posture changes by approximately 2 degrees in a direction that, on anyone else, would constitute satisfaction. The rain on Kamino is not weather. It is a permanent condition, a geological fact. The planet's atmosphere locked into a cycle of precipitation so total and unrelenting that the Kaminoans built their entire civilization on stilts above it rather than negotiate with it. The facility at Tepoka City rises from the ocean on pylons sunk deep into the seabed, white and sterile and enormous, and the rain hammers it from every direction simultaneously, and the sound it makes against the transparent steel is not loud but constant, a pressure rather than a noise, something you feel in the back of your teeth after the first hour. Anakin has been here before. He knows the layout the way he knows the layout of places where important things happened, not perfectly, not architecturally, but in the way the body maps spaces where it was once afraid. He knows the corridor that curves left past the cloning analysis lab. He knows the observation deck that overlooks the growth chambers, the rows of tubes descending into amber-lit infrastructure. Life manufactured in quantity. He knows the executive wing where the Kaminoan administrators receive Republic liaisons with cool professional courtesy and a talent for showing you exactly what you came to see and nothing else. He knows, now, what they were hiding. Lama Su receives them in the same reception chamber she uses for all high-value Republic visits. An oval room with a curved ceiling and a viewport looking out over the ocean, the rain drawing white lines down the transparent steel. She is tall in the way Kaminoans are always tall, her neck long and her movements calibrated to a precision that reads as serenity, and is actually something more controlled than that. She looks at Anakin and Ahsoka and the 4 members of the 501st, standing at parade rest behind Rex, and she gives no visible indication that the visit is anything other than expected. "General Skywalker," she says. "We received Captain Rex's notification this morning. I've prepared access to the training assessment facilities." "Thank you," Anakin says. "I'll also need an hour with your central network infrastructure. The GAR is conducting a command architecture review. I need to verify the inhibitor broadcast system is flagged correctly in the new readiness protocols." A pause. Brief, precise, the duration of a calculation. "Of course." Lama Su says, "I'll have someone escort you." Rex runs the assessment. He does it properly, because Rex does everything properly. The 501st troopers cycle through the training scenarios with the specific professional efficiency of soldiers who know they are being watched by someone who actually understands what they're doing, and the Kaminoan observers record completion times and scoring metrics. And nothing about the morning looks like anything other than what it is supposed to be. Ahsoka stays with Rex. This is the plan. She is visible, engaged, present in the assessment facility, a senior Jedi Knight lending institutional weight to a routine inspection. She asks the right questions. She speaks to the Kaminoan liaison about training protocols with the focused interest of someone who has strong opinions about clone education, which she does, which makes the performance require no performance at all. Anakin walks with the escort to the network infrastructure wing. The escort is a Kaminoan administrator he doesn't know by name. One of a dozen who rotate through liaison duties for Republic visits, efficient and courteous and accustomed to showing GAR officers exactly as much as their clearance level requires, and nothing beyond it. She walks him through the corridor with the thorough patience of someone who has done this before, explaining the broadcast architecture in the careful, complete language of a facility that takes its Republic obligations seriously. Anakin listens. He asks questions calibrated to sound like the questions a man asks when he's verifying readiness specs. Technical, specific, concerned with output ranges and signal protocols. He knows the answers. He knew the answers before he boarded the transport this morning. But the questions give him the rhythm of the walk, the reason to move slowly through the corridor, the cover for noticing which access panels are which and where the security intervals fall. 4 cameras, 2 mounted technicians behind transparent steel in a monitoring bay to the left, a biometric lock on the central server room, palm and retinal, which is a problem until it isn't, because the escort places her hand on the panel without being asked, explaining that authorized personnel accompany all GAR liaisons as a matter of protocol. The door opens. The server room is cold and blue-lit, and smells of recycled air, and the particular metallic quality of processing heat kept below threshold. Towers of hardware rise in rows to the ceiling, data cables running between them in organized bundles, indicator lights pulsing in patterns that mean nothing to anyone who doesn't know how to read them. Anakin reads them. He spent 2 decades inside the Empire's military infrastructure, and before that a decade inside the Republic's, and the architecture underneath both systems shares the same structural logic, the same way of organizing broadcast hierarchies, the same physical design philosophy for components that need emergency access. The broadcast node is in the third row. The inhibitor command array sits on a dedicated server with a physical isolation switch, a design choice that made it simultaneously more secure and easier to access. Because the isolation switch has to be reachable by an authorized technician in an emergency, which means there is a place you can stand and a thing you can do. What Anakin knows, what Vader learned across 2 decades of commanding the systems the Empire inherited from Kamino, is that the isolation switch was never just a fail-safe. It was a design flaw. When the array is tripped into diagnostic mode via the physical switch, the diagnostic pulse it sends to verify network reach is structurally identical to a command pulse at threshold value. The Kaminoans built it that way because their engineers solved for emergency access speed, and not for the possibility that someone might know what the diagnostic pulse actually looks like from the inside. He knows what it looks like from the inside. The escort is explaining the redundancy architecture of the secondary broadcast relays. Anakin moves along the first row, nodding, and reaches out as if checking a cable connection at the base of the second tower, and the Force does the rest. It is a small application, not the kind that announces itself, not the kind that requires effort. The isolation switch is a physical lever, spring-loaded, designed to require a deliberate two-handed action to prevent accidental engagement. The spring resistance is approximately 4 kilograms. The Force doesn't notice 4 kilograms. The switch moves. The indicator on the inhibitor command array changes from blue to amber. The array drops into diagnostic mode and sends its pulse, the pulse that has always been indistinguishable from a command signal at the threshold the Kaminoans never thought to change, because no one was ever supposed to know the difference. The pulse travels the network. The chips receive it. They read it the only way their architecture allows them to read a signal arriving from the array in that configuration. They comply. It takes 11 seconds. The escort is still talking about redundancy protocols. The indicator light on the inhibitor command array moves from amber back to blue. The server room is exactly as it was. The rows of hardware pulse their meaningless rhythms. The air recyclers run. The rain, outside and everywhere, continues its permanent argument with the planet. In the growth chambers below them, in the barracks where off-duty troopers sleep, in the training facilities where new generations cycle through combat assessments, in every garbase on every planet in the Republic's theater of war, in every place a clone soldier draws breath. Something very small stops working. It makes no sound. It causes no pain. The soldiers whose brains contain it feel nothing. They are training and sleeping and playing cards and cleaning weapons and arguing about rations and writing letters home to a home they were never given, and in the part of their brains they were never told about, a mechanism built to unmake them goes quiet. The escort concludes her explanation of the redundancy protocols. Anakin thanks her for the thoroughness. He says the readiness verification is complete, that the inhibitor system will flag correctly in the new protocols, and he asks her to transmit the network specs to GAR Command through the standard liaison channel. She says she will. He follows her out of the server room. The biometric lock engages behind them. He does not look back at it. Ahsoka finds him on the observation deck during the lunch interval, the two of them standing at the viewport above the growth chambers while the 501st eats in the canteen, and the Kaminoan staff rotates shifts. Below them, the amber-lit tubes stretch in rows beyond counting. Each one contains a person. Each one of those people used to contain a mechanism designed to kill her. She stands beside him and looks down. "Done?" she asks. "Done." She is quiet for a moment. Then, they don't know. No, any of them, the clones. They don't know anything changed. "No," she breathes out slowly. "Good," she says. Not with relief, with something that needs the weight of the word rather than the lightness of it. He is about to say something else when she turns from the viewport and looks at the wall to their left, where a transparent steel panel separates the observation deck from a Kaminoan administrative corridor beyond. The corridor is empty. "Anakin." Her voice is flat. "Controlled. When you accessed that network, did you leave a trace?" "No." "Are you certain?" He opens his mouth, and somewhere in the Republic Executive Building on Coruscant, in an office with a perfect view of the Senate Dome, Palpatine sits behind his desk and sets down the document he was reading, and looks at nothing in particular for a moment, his face arranged in its usual expression of benevolent consideration. Underneath it, something stirs. He is not certain what he felt. He is not even certain he felt anything. A fluctuation, perhaps, a variable that shifted without announcement in a system he has spent years building toward perfect stability. He files it. He picks up his document again. He does not stop thinking about it. Level 1313 does not have a sky. It has a ceiling, a massive, industrial underside of the city above. Pipes and conduits and structural supports running in every direction, close enough in some corridors that a tall person has to angle their shoulders to pass beneath them. The light down here is amber and inconsistent, sourced from whatever fixtures haven't burned out, and whoever thought to replace them, which is not many and not recently. The air tastes of machine oil and recycled water, and the specific human residue of a place where people live, because they have run out of better options. Ahsoka moves through it alone. This is not the plan. The plan, constructed 3 days ago in Rex's quarters over a layout of the Coruscant underlevels and 2 cups of cold calf, was that she would go in with Anakin covering the approach. Rex positioned at the secondary exit with 2 plainclothes 501st troopers, and the entire operation wrapped in 40 minutes. The plan was clean and logical and accounted for variables. The variable it did not account for was the comm blackout. It started 4 blocks back, a gradual thing. The kind of gradual that tricks you into thinking the problem is temporary until you've gone far enough that turning around requires a calculation you didn't plan for. Her comlink shows signal, shows full bars, and transmits nothing. She tested it against Rex's frequency twice and got silence both times. And the third time she got static that resolved briefly into the shape of a voice before collapsing back into nothing. She keeps moving. The intel was specific. A separatist cache, weapons and command equipment, stashed in a lower-level warehouse that GAR intelligence has been watching for 6 days. Her job is simple: confirm the cache, photograph the manifest, extract without engagement if possible. 40 minutes, clean and out. The warehouse door is exactly where the layout said it would be. The lock on it is not. The original lock, a standard commercial-grade magnetic seal, the kind used on thousands of storage units across Coruscant's lower levels, has been replaced with a military cipher panel, fresh installation. The adhesive still showing at the edges. Someone upgraded the security between the time the intelligence report was filed and right now, which means either the intel is compromised or the situation is. Both options produce the same conclusion. She should leave. She reaches for her comlink again. Static, and then, brief, clean, there and gone in under a second. Rex's voice saying her name. She waits. Nothing. She opens the door. The warehouse is large and dark and smells of the particular kind of industrial disuse that accumulates over years rather than weeks. Her lightsaber doesn't clear her hip. She moves through the dark with her hands empty and her senses extended, reading the space the way Anakin taught her to read spaces, with the Force rather than the eyes. The cache is real. She finds it in the back quarter of the warehouse, crates stacked under a tarpaulin, and she lifts the edge and confirms the manifest markings and notes the volume, which is larger than the intelligence report suggested by a factor of approximately 3. Enough weapons to arm a significant force. Enough command equipment to run a tactical operation from underground. She is photographing the manifest panel when she feels them. Not many. 7, no, 9, positioned at the entry points, the loading bay shutters, the auxiliary door she noted on the way in. They moved into position while she was looking at the crates, which means they were already inside the warehouse when she entered, which means they were waiting. 9 hostiles. Her comlink producing nothing. Rex on the wrong side of 4 blocks of signal blackout. Anakin somewhere above the perimeter, still looking for a way in. Ahsoka Tano exhales slowly through her nose and ignites both lightsabers. The first wave comes from the sides. 6 of them, not droids, which is the first thing that registers. Because a separatist operation in Coruscant's underlevels running human mercenaries instead of battle droids is an operational choice that costs significantly more and leaves significantly less evidence. They are good. Not Jedi good, not clone good, but professional, coordinated. Moving in pairs that are designed to split a solo defender's attention. She doesn't let them split it. The instinct Anakin built into her across 3 years of apprenticeship now tells her to move forward rather than back, into the space between the pairs rather than retreating to the wall they're trying to pin her against. She moves forward. The first pair doesn't expect that. The second pair adjusts, but by the time they adjust, she's already through the gap and behind them, and the geometry of their formation collapses. 3 down. She rolls under a repeating blaster from the loading bay, comes up inside its firing arc, removes it from the conversation. 4 down. The remaining 2 from the first wave break toward the auxiliary door, not fleeing, repositioning, which means there is a signal being sent somewhere, and a second instruction being received. She lets them go. Chasing them means turning her back to the loading bay, and the loading bay is where the other 3 are, and the other 3 have stopped moving in a way that means they are waiting for something. She stops in the center of the warehouse floor, both blades up, and waits with them. The shutters on the main loading bay open. The sound they make is industrial and enormous, the groan of old hydraulics hauling heavy steel, and the amber light from the underlevels pours in and silhouettes the figure standing in the doorway. General Grievous does not move with organic weight. He moves with the specific lurching efficiency of a being who has replaced most of the biological with mechanical and has had decades to optimize what remains. He is tall and white and wrong in the particular way that he has always been wrong, not broken but assembled, the way something is assembled when the person doing the assembling is solving for function and not for the result being comfortable to look at. Behind him, 2 Magna Guards unfold themselves from transport configuration. Their electrostaffs extend. Ahsoka's jaw tightens by approximately 1 degree. Tano, Grievous says. His vocoder produces her name with the flat precision of a man who has been briefed. You're smaller than I expected. People keep saying that, she says. It keeps being their last observation. He produces a sound that might be amusement, or might be a mechanical artifact. His forearms separate, 2 taking sabers from his collection, 2 remaining in their default configuration, and the Magna Guards step to either side in the loose flanking pattern they use when their principal intends to be the primary engagement point. 3 opponents. 2 exits controlled. Comms down. No backup signal received in the 6 minutes since she entered this building. The math is straightforward and the math is bad. She keeps both blades up. Grievous takes 1 step forward, and the Magna Guards move with him, and Ahsoka shifts her weight to the ball of her right foot, the way Anakin taught her in the 3rd week of her apprenticeship. Stay mobile, stay inside their reach, make the space smaller, and she is calculating. Running the geometry of 3 opponents against 2 blades against the distance to the auxiliary door, when the force behind her does something it has not done in the last 12 minutes. It arrives. Not Anakin's presence in the abstract. Anakin's presence the way a weather front arrives, the way pressure changes before a storm. The specific texture of him she has been reading since she was 14. It comes through the loading bay shutter on the left side, the one Grievous's people didn't control, because it requires an override code to open from outside. The shutter opens. It makes no sound. Because the hydraulics don't engage, it simply moves, pulled open by something that doesn't need hydraulics. The amber light frames Anakin Skywalker standing in the gap, one hand lowered from the gesture that opened it, his lightsaber not yet ignited, his face arranged in the expression she now recognizes as Vader's expression, wearing Anakin's features, calm in the way that has nothing to do with the absence of danger, and everything to do with the presence of certainty. He looks at Grievous. He looks at the Magna Guards. He looks at Ahsoka, and his eyes do a single quick assessment. Upright, both blades active, 6 down already, and something in his posture recalibrates. Sorry I'm late, he says. And his lightsaber ignites, and the blue light fills the warehouse, and for the first time in the last 12 minutes the math changes entirely. Grievous looks between them. For a fraction of a second, something moves behind the general's photoreceptors that is not calculation, not fear. Grievous is not built for fear, but a recognition that the room has just become a different room than the one he walked into, and the difference matters. Ahsoka feels it through the Force. She keeps her blades up. She does not look away from the Magna Guards. Grievous has fought Jedi before. This is not an observation that requires elaboration. His collection of lightsabers is its own elaboration. Each one a name, each name a story that ended the same way. He has studied Jedi the way a predator studies prey, not with admiration, but with the cold taxonomy of something that needs to understand a thing in order to destroy it. He knows their forms, their tendencies, the micro-tells that appear in their footwork when they are afraid, when they are overextending, when their focus is divided between an opponent and a concern they are trying not to show. He studies Anakin Skywalker now, in the 2 seconds before the engagement opens, and finds nothing he recognizes. The body is Skywalker's. He knows Skywalker's body from intelligence reports and battlefield surveillance. The height, the breadth of shoulder, the way he has always carried himself like a man who expects the room to adjust to him rather than the reverse. But the way the body occupies space right now is wrong. There is no performance in it. No heat. Skywalker runs hot. Every engagement Grievous has reviewed shows a man whose aggression is an accelerant, who gets faster and louder and more dangerous as the emotion climbs. This version is not climbing. This version is already at the top of something, standing there with total patience, and the patience is somehow more threatening than the aggression ever was. Grievous makes his decision and deploys all 4 sabers and moves. The Magna Guards go for Ahsoka. This is the correct tactical choice. She is the smaller threat by standard assessment, and occupying her removes the 2-front problem, and her blades are already committed to a defensive posture that suggests she's been running for 12 minutes and is not at full capacity. Grievous has read the situation correctly. He has read the wrong situation. The first Magna Guard brings its electro-staff down in the diagonal strike that bypasses most lightsaber guards by attacking the junction between blade and grip. Ahsoka isn't there when it arrives. She's 2 steps left, already inside the second guard's reach, her white blade driving upward through the joint between its torso and left arm, with the specific angle she and Anakin spent 3 weeks on Coruscant drilling, because he told her, with no explanation she accepted at the time, that she would need it. She needed it. The second guard loses the arm and staggers. The first recalibrates and comes again, and she flows into the space the second one vacated and pulls the first one's momentum past her and lets it complete its own strike into the warehouse floor, and then she's behind it, and the geometry is hers. 19 seconds, both Magna Guards down. She turns to find Anakin. Grievous attacks with 4 sabers in a pattern designed to overwhelm. Too high. Too low. The arcs overlapping so that blocking one blade opens a line to another. A mathematical problem built for a single opponent with a single blade and a finite number of angles to cover. Anakin doesn't block. He moves into it. Not through it, not the aggressive counterattack that Gemso usually produces, the redirect and overwhelm that tries to match force with force. He moves into the negative space between Grievous's arcs, the gap that exists for approximately 0.4 of a second at the apex of the swing before the pattern completes, and he is there before Grievous's attack reaches the point where the gap closes. His lightsaber takes the lowest of Grievous's 4 blades at the crossguard. The Force does the rest. Grievous is strong, mechanically, measurably, engineered beyond organic limits. The grip he keeps on his sabers is calibrated to resist disarming from any direction at any angle. Anakin doesn't fight the grip. He lets the blade lock hold for exactly the duration required to bring his left hand up and place it flat against Grievous's chest plating. And then he pushes. Not explosively. Not with the showy full-body surge of a man trying to demonstrate power. With the quiet, structural certainty of someone applying exactly as much force as the situation requires, and not 1 gram more. The chest plating buckles. Grievous goes back 6 meters and hits the warehouse wall, and the sound he makes is not a voice. It is the sound of internal components registering damage they were not designed to absorb, actuators misfiring, the mechanical complaint of a system that has just been asked to perform beyond its tolerance. He slides down the wall. 1 hand. 2 sabers lost. 2 still in his remaining grips. He gets up. This is what Grievous does. This is the fact of him that makes him dangerous even when the engagement is going wrong. He is not capable of the particular kind of despair that makes organic beings stop. He processes damage and recalculates and continues, because continuing is the only variable in his operational parameters that he has never modified. He gets up, and he throws both remaining sabers. Not at Anakin, at Ahsoka, who is 3 meters to Anakin's right and not watching for a projectile from that angle, because the Magna Guards are down, and she has allowed herself a fraction of a second's reorientation. Anakin's left hand comes up without a visible decision involved. Both sabers stop in the air. They hang there, spinning slowly, 2 meters from Ahsoka's face, held in a telekinetic grip that makes no sound and requires, apparently, no effort. Anakin's attention remains on Grievous. His body hasn't turned. His saber is still angled toward the general. The 2 captured blades simply stay where they are, suspended, waiting. Ahsoka looks at them. She has seen Anakin do extraordinary things. She has been beside him for 3 years of extraordinary things. She has watched him pull cruisers and catch buildings and hold a full Mon Calamari city from collapse for 22 minutes. She has never seen him do something extraordinary and look bored. He deactivates the captured sabers with a small twitch of his fingers. They fall to the warehouse floor with a clatter that sounds somehow like punctuation. Grievous makes his assessment. It takes him approximately 1 second, which is a long time for a processor that runs at his speed, which means the assessment is not a simple one. His remaining operational capacity: 1 functional arm, chest damage affecting hydraulic pressure in his lower chassis, photoreceptors registering minor distortion from the impact, is not 0. He has fought from worse. He has won from worse. But the man standing 15 meters away from him is not what the intelligence reports described, and the girl who just took apart 2 Magna Guards in 19 seconds is not what the deployment parameters assumed. And the operation was built on parameters that no longer describe the room he is standing in. Grievous moves for the loading bay, not fleeing, retreating, which is a different category entirely in his internal taxonomy, a tactical recalibration rather than a failure, a living general being more useful than a destroyed one, the mission an acknowledged loss, and the next mission already being structured in the processing space where this one used to be. He is through the loading bay and into the underlevels before Anakin reaches the shutter. Anakin watches him go. He does not pursue. The Force tells him Grievous is wounded and moving fast and will not stop moving until he's off planet, and pursuing a wounded Grievous through 4 kilometers of uncontrolled underlevels is a problem with a worse risk profile than letting him go. He knows where this ends for Grievous. He knows the time and the planet and the man who finishes it. He lets him go. The warehouse settles into silence. Ahsoka stands in the center of the floor, both blades still lit, and looks at Anakin, and Anakin looks back at her, and the thing that passes between them through the training bond is not a thought and not a word. She deactivates her sabers. He deactivates his. "Your comms were jammed," he says. "I noticed. Rex found the blackout perimeter 40 minutes ago. It took time to find an approach that didn't put us both in the blackout." She nods slowly. Her eyes move across the warehouse, the downed mercenaries, the crates under their tarpaulin, the 2 Magna Guards in pieces. The scorch marks on the floor where Grievous hit the wall hard enough to discharge something electrical in his chassis. "He was waiting," she says. "This was built for us." "For you," Anakin says. "I wasn't supposed to be here." She looks at him. "He's adapting," Anakin says. "Palpatine, the isolation strategy doesn't work anymore, so he tries removal instead. Kill you, or put me in a position where I think you died because of your proximity to me." He pauses. "It's what I would have done." Ahsoka is quiet for a moment. "Is that supposed to be reassuring?" she says. "It's supposed to be useful," he says. "Are you hurt?" She does a brief inventory, a blaster graze across her left forearm that she didn't feel during the engagement and feels now. "Nothing structural." "Graz," she says. "I'm fine." He crosses to her and looks at the arm the way he has always looked at injuries on people he is responsible for. Quick, clinical, storing the information. "Bacta when we're out," he says. "Anakin," she waits until he looks up from the arm. "That thing you did, with the 2 sabers." He holds her gaze, says nothing. "I've never felt you do that," she says. "I've never felt you do any of what you did tonight, and I've been standing next to you for 3 years." She pauses. In the Force. There was nothing dark in it. Any of it. No, he says. How? He looks at her for a long moment, and what crosses his face is not easy to name, not pride, not relief, something quieter than both. Because you were in the room, he says. She holds that. Outside, 4 blocks away, Rex's comlink breaks through the blackout perimeter, and his voice comes through clear and urgent and wanting to know if she's alive, and Ahsoka keys her comlink and tells him she is. And her voice is steady, and in the Force beside her Anakin's presence is still and bright, and carrying that impossible old grief, and also, underneath it, for the first time she has felt it in him, something that is almost peace. Mandalore smells of ash and old war. The planet has been contested long enough that the smell has become structural, embedded in the white stone of Sundari's domed city, carried in the recycled air of its corridors, present in the specific quality of silence that exists in places where recent violence has not yet finished being recent. The Death Watch held this city. Bo-Katan's resistance bled for it corridor by corridor, and now the siege is entering its final phase, and the city belongs to no one fully. And in the throne room at its center, Maul sits and waits with the patience of a man who has learned, through specific and repeated suffering, that patience is the only reliable weapon left to him. He hears them before they arrive, not their footsteps, the Force, which is a language Maul reads with the particular fluency of someone who has had very little else to read for a long time. 2 presences, moving together through the outer corridor, and the first one he recognizes instantly. Tano. The leverage point he has been waiting for, the name that was always going to bring Skywalker if he pulled it correctly. The second one stops him. He knows Anakin Skywalker's Force presence. He has made it his business to know it. Skywalker is the variable in Sidious's plan that Maul has studied most carefully, the bright burning signature that is simultaneously the Sith Order's greatest asset and its most obvious structural weakness. He knows what Skywalker feels like in the Force the way you know a fire by its heat. What is walking toward him now is not a fire. It is something that has already burned. The throne room doors open without a dramatic gesture from either of them, which is itself a kind of dramatic gesture. Ahsoka enters first, white blades not yet ignited, moving with the focused economy of a fighter who is in a room with a known threat and is not performing casualness about it. Anakin follows half a step behind her right shoulder, and Maul watches him cross the threshold, and the calculation Maul runs in the first 3 seconds of looking at him produces a result he does not trust, and runs again and gets the same answer. Something has changed in Anakin Skywalker. Something fundamental. Something that should not be possible in a man of his age. In a war of this duration. Moving in the direction the Force has always indicated he moves. Maul rises from the throne. He does it slowly, deliberately, with the physical authority of a man who controls the room he stands in regardless of who else enters it. He is lean and red and precise, his movements economical in the way that decades of survival have made them. And he descends the throne steps with his hands at his sides and his eyes on Anakin. Skywalker, he says. Then, with a fractional recalibration, "You're not what I was expecting." "People keep saying that," Ahsoka says from his left. Maul doesn't look at her. He keeps looking at Anakin, because Anakin is the puzzle, and Ahsoka Tano. Leverage. Variable. The name he pulled to get Skywalker here is suddenly the least interesting person in the room, and Maul's processing capacity is too valuable to spend on known quantities when an unknown one is standing 3 meters away, looking at him like a man who has already finished this conversation and is waiting for the version of Maul in the room to catch up. "You came together," Maul says. "I had assumed Tano, alone, then Kenobi, eventually, when the bait had done its work." He pauses. "I had a speech prepared." "I know," Anakin says. Maul's eyes narrow by one precise degree. "You know. You were going to tell me about Palpatine, his plan, what he intends for me specifically. You were going to offer it as a warning, a true thing delivered as a trade good, because Maul doesn't give anything away, and the warning is also a hook. You tell me what I'm walking toward, and watch what I do with it. And what I do with it tells you whether I'm worth an alliance, or whether you're on your own. Anakin pauses. That's the speech. The throne room is very quiet. Maul looks at him for a long moment. Then, he looks at Ahsoka. Then he looks back at Anakin, and something shifts in his expression, not surprise exactly, because Maul has trained surprise out of himself, but the thing that exists in the space where surprise used to be. Who told you? He says. No one. Anakin says. I already know, Maul, and we are going to end this today. Maul goes still. Not the stillness of a predator preparing, the stillness of a man whose model of the situation has just failed to load, who is holding the pieces of a calculation that no longer produce a coherent result. He has spent years building his understanding of Sidious's plan, years cultivating the specific value of being the piece on the board that knows the whole game, the manufactured war. Anakin is the instrument, the Jedi is the target. Years shaping himself into the one person who could walk into a room and detonate a truth that no one else was carrying. Skywalker is carrying it already. Not suspicion, not a pieced-together hypothesis. He is carrying it the way you carry something you have held for a long time, with the comfortable specificity of a man who knows the weight of a thing, because he has been standing under it for years. How, Maul says, and his voice has a quality it almost never has. Stripped, genuinely asking. It doesn't matter how, Anakin says. What matters is that Palpatine's timeline is already broken. We've seen to that. And we need you. Not your alliance, not your cooperation, your testimony. In front of the Council. Everything you know about Sidious, his identity, his plan, the war he manufactured, what he intends for the Jedi, corroborating everything we know, so that when we walk into that office it is not two Jedi acting without sanction. Maul processes this. You want to use me as evidence, he says. You want to survive, Ahsoka says, and have something worth surviving for. Those two things happen to align. Maul looks at her for the first time in the conversation with genuine attention. She holds the look without blinking. Her white blades still at her sides, her posture the posture of a woman who has already decided what happens in this room and is waiting for the room to confirm it. The Council won't accept my testimony, Maul says. They have no reason to trust, they have no reason to disbelieve it, Anakin says. Not when everything you tell them maps exactly to evidence they already have and chose not to look at. The Council doesn't need to trust you. They need to be unable to explain away what you're telling them when it's sitting next to everything else. Maul is quiet. You've been trying to destroy Sidious for years, Anakin continues, not because you serve the light. Because he made you what you are and discarded you, and you haven't forgiven him for it, and you never will. He pauses. This is the best chance you will ever have. Better than anything you built on Mandalore. Better than the Shadow Collective. You walk into that council chamber with us and you tell the truth. What you know, what you witnessed, what you were part of. And Palpatine is finished. And you did it. He lets that land. That's what you get. Maul doesn't move. Something works behind his eyes. The long, complex machinery of a man who has structured his entire existence around a hatred that has outlasted everything else. Turning over the offer, looking at it from every angle, finding the catch, failing to find it, looking again. And if I refuse, he says, then we subdue you and bring you anyway, Ahsoka says, with no particular heat. We need a live Maul with a functioning memory. We don't need a willing one. Willing is better. Another silence. Maul looks at Anakin. You would subdue me. I would, Anakin says. And it would be brief. The fight, when it comes, lasts 40 seconds. Maul makes his decision not with words but with his lightsaber, which ignites in the same motion as his left hand coming up and pulling the throne steps apart with the Force. Durasteel fragments scattering in every direction. The opening move of a man who wants the geometry of the room destroyed before engagement begins because controlled geometry favors the 2-on-1. Anakin steps to the right. Ahsoka steps to the left. The fragments stop in the air between them. They hang there, rotating slowly in two separate fields, and Maul sees immediately that the telekinetic containment is not coming from Anakin alone. Ahsoka has her hand up too, and the fields are different, and the two of them have divided the debris field between them without looking at each other, without a signal, without anything that Maul can identify as communication. He launches himself anyway, because Maul at full commitment is a problem for anyone, because decades of survival have made him genuinely dangerous in ways that go beyond calculation. He goes for Ahsoka's left side, the opening that exists in her guard when her hand is occupied, the angle that his processing identified in the first 3 seconds of watching her move. Anakin is already there, not blocking, positioned, the way a piece is positioned rather than moved, already occupying the space that Maul's strike was aimed at, his lightsaber coming up not to parry, but to guide, redirecting the crimson blade with the minimal deflection required to send it past his own guard and into empty space. And the momentum of Maul's committed strike carries him through the gap. Ahsoka's hand closes on the back of his saber arm. The force pin is instantaneous. Maul goes rigid, not from pain but from the sudden, total absence of motor control in the targeted limb, a precision nerve compression that Anakin taught her in the second year of her apprenticeship, which she has used exactly once before and not on anyone of this caliber. His saber falls. He is on his knees before he has processed how he got there. Ahsoka stands behind him, her grip maintaining the pin, both white blades inactive. Anakin stands in front of him, his saber deactivated, his hands at his sides. Maul breathes through his nose in the controlled rhythm of a man managing pain without showing it. He looks up at Anakin. The shock in his expression is real. She can feel it in the Force, genuine, unperformed. A man who has fought Kenobi and Sidious and every caliber of opponent the galaxy has produced, and who has just been taken apart in under a minute by a version of Skywalker that should not exist. "What are you?" Maul says. Anakin looks down at him. "Someone who's already seen how this ends," he says. "Get up, we have a council session to arrange." Maul gets up. He does not speak again until they are in the transport, and when he does it is not to Anakin but to Ahsoka, and what he says is quiet enough that Anakin doesn't hear it. "He wasn't always like this," Maul says. "It is not a question." "No," Ahsoka says. Maul looks at the viewport, at Mandalore falling away beneath them. "What changed him?" he says. Ahsoka is quiet for a long time. "I left," she says. "The council does not convene easily. Getting 10 masters into a secured chamber on short notice, with a restrained Sith Lord in the corridor outside and no advance briefing on the subject matter, requires a specific kind of political pressure that Anakin has never previously been willing to apply, and applies now without hesitation. He contacts Obi-Wan first, not because Obi-Wan has the most institutional weight, but because Obi-Wan's voice carries a quality of measured alarm that other masters listen to, the alarm of a man who does not alarm easily, and therefore means it when he does. He tells Obi-Wan 3 sentences. He does not tell him which 3 sentences, because some things are better received in person, when the speaker can watch the listener's face and calibrate what comes next. He tells him it is urgent, it is verified, and it requires the full council. Obi-Wan arrives at the secured conference chamber 17 minutes later, with Kit Fisto at his shoulder, and the expression of a man who has been running the 3 sentences through every possible interpretation and not liking any of them. Mace Windu arrives last. He looks at the restraint cuffs on Maul's wrists, and at Maul's face, and at Anakin, and he says nothing for a moment that stretches long enough to become its own kind of statement. "Begin," he says. Anakin begins with the chips. He begins there because it is the most verifiable fact in the room, not a Force vision, not a future memory, not the testimony of a man with documented reasons to destabilize the Republic. It is a physical object currently present in the body of every clone soldier in the Grand Army of the Republic, and he describes it with the precise technical language he spent weeks learning and confirming, and he watches the masters process it. Plo Koon's reaction is the purest, a stillness that deepens rather than tenses, the stillness of a man absorbing something that has immediate and personal implications, because Plo Koon has spent 3 years fighting alongside clone soldiers and knows their faces and knows their names and knows now what was sitting behind their eyes this entire time. Ki-Adi-Mundi is doing the arithmetic. Anakin can see it, the casualty projections running behind his eyes, the scale of what a simultaneous execution order would have produced. The number his face does not show, because the number is too large to show. Obi-Wan is looking at Anakin. not at the information, at Anakin. With the expression of a man who has known someone for 15 years and is encountering a version of them that requires him to revise something fundamental about what he thought he understood. The chips have been deactivated, Anakin says. Republic-wide. The clones are no longer at risk. How? Mace says. Camino. 3 weeks ago. On whose authority? Mine. He meets Windu's gaze. You can discipline me for it after. He turns to Maul. This is the architecture of the presentation. Anakin's testimony first, establishing the factual foundation, and then Maul's corroboration arriving from a direction the Council cannot dismiss as coordinated fabrication. Because no one who knows Maul would believe he is capable of coordinating his testimony with a Jedi. He is too visibly contemptuous of the arrangement to have chosen it willingly. Maul stands in his restraints and looks at the assembled masters with the expression of a man who has imagined this room from the outside for a long time and finds the reality of it smaller than he expected. Darth Sidious, he begins, and the name lands in the room like a physical object, has been operating within the Republic's executive structure for decades. His plan has 2 components. The first is the war, both sides of it, funded and directed from a single source, designed to exhaust the Jedi and concentrate emergency power in the Chancellor's office. The war was never about separatism. It was never about the banking clans or the treaty failures or any of the 1,000 grievances it was built upon. It was architecture. He is the architect. No one speaks. The second component, Maul continues, is the Purge, a contingency command designed to be broadcast simultaneously across the Grand Army, an order that would turn the Jedi's own military support into their executioners in a single moment. The Jedi would have no warning. The clones would have no choice. He pauses, and something moves behind his eyes that is not quite satisfaction and not quite grief, something older than both. I know this because I was his apprentice, because I spent years inside the structure of his plan before he discarded me, because I watched him build the crisis, manage the war, and position the pieces. I have no reason to corroborate a Jedi's testimony. I am doing so because the testimony is accurate, and because I have waited a very long time for the opportunity this room represents. Mace Windu looks at Maul for a long time. You're telling us, he says carefully, that Palpatine is Darth Sidious. I'm telling you, Maul says, that you have been fighting his war for 3 years and calling it yours. The silence that follows is not the silence of disbelief. Ahsoka has been in this chamber enough times to read its silences, and this one has a different texture than denial. It has the texture of a thing clicking into place, of a pattern resolving, of a set of facts that were always present in the room finally being arranged in the configuration that reveals what they were pointing at all along. She watches the Masters' faces and sees the moment move through them like a wave, each one arriving at it slightly differently, in the order their particular minds require. Obi-Wan arrives first. She sees it happen, the slight compression of his expression, not surprise but recognition, the look of a man who has had a feeling he couldn't name for years and has just been given the name. Yoda has his eyes closed. He has had them closed since Maul began speaking. He sits with his hands folded on his Geimer stick, and he listens, and the force around him is doing something she doesn't have the words for. Not agitation, not distress, something older than both. Mace is on his feet. The war room assembles itself without being called. Mace moves to the center of the chamber, and the Masters orient toward him by habit, by years of convening, by the institutional gravity of a man who has run this council's tactical decisions through 3 years of war. He begins with what they know. Palpatine controls the Senate through emergency powers consolidated over months of escalating military crisis his own agents manufactured. He controls the GAR through a command structure that reports to the Chancellor's office. He controls public narrative through the HoloNet, which operates under wartime regulations he authored. He stops. What he does not control is this chamber, and he does not know that we know. How long before he suspects? Ki-Adi-Mundi says. Anakin answers. He already suspects something. He's been aware of anomalies since Camino. He hasn't identified the source yet. He's been watching for changes and finding nothing he can name. But the window is closing. Then we move today, Mace says. Yes, Anakin says. Mace looks at him. The look has a specific quality. Not suspicion, not the old friction of two men who have never fully trusted each other's methods. Something more complicated. The look of a man reassessing a file he thought he understood. You said you know how the confrontation goes wrong. I know how it went wrong, Anakin says. Without preparation, without corroboration, with one master going in alone believing Palpatine was cornered. Palpatine is never cornered. He has contingencies for contingencies. The moment he senses a single master approaching his office in a disposition that reads as hostile, he activates the next layer. He has always been 3 moves ahead. He pauses. He was 3 moves ahead of me for 20 years. I know what that looks like from the inside. The chamber absorbs this. What do you need? Mace says. 4 masters total. Enough to contain a force lightning assault if he opens with one. Small enough that we can move through the Senate building without triggering his political sensors. Anakin looks at him directly. And I lead. Ahsoka beside me. The 2 of us go through that door first. Mace's jaw sets. Skywalker, Master Windu. Anakin's voice does not rise. The last time this confrontation happened, you went in with 3 masters who are in this room right now. Kit Fisto, Aegon Kolar, Ceci Tien. He killed all 3 of them in under a minute before you got close enough to matter. I watched it happen. He holds the silence for exactly 1 beat. Let me go first. The chamber is very still. Mace looks at him, the full weight of it. The look of a man who has commanded armies and lost them, and learned what the losing costs, and is doing the calculation now in real time, running the variables, arriving at the answer he does not want, and accepting it, because the alternative is worse. Agreed, he says. Obi-Wan exhales through his nose. Anakin, he says it quietly, the way he says things he means without performance. Whatever happened to you, wherever this came from, he stops. Starts again. You should have had someone to tell. Anakin looks at him. Something moves in his face that is not quite grief and not quite gratitude, and lives in the territory between them. I know, he says. In the corridor outside, restrained and sitting against the wall with a temple guard on either side, Maul stares at the middle distance with the expression of a man running a new model of the future through a processor that spent years running a different one. Ahsoka crouches in front of him. You'll be held here during the operation, she says. When it's done, the Council will determine your status. My status, he repeats, with the specific tone of a man for whom the word contains decades of irony. You helped, she says. That counts for something. He looks at her. Does it? She holds his gaze. I don't know yet, she says. But it's more than you had yesterday. She stands. Maul watches her go back through the chamber doors, and the doors close, and he looks at the temple guard on his left, who looks back with the blank professionalism of someone whose job does not require engagement, and Maul returns his gaze to the middle distance. He runs the new model again. For the first time in years, the model has a different ending. He is not sure what to do with that. The Senate building at midday is a public place. This is by design. Palpatine has always understood that visibility is its own kind of armor. The corridors are populated with aides and senators and security personnel and the ambient bureaucratic machinery of a government conducting a war. And none of them look at the 4 Jedi moving through the main hall with any particular alarm, because Jedi in the Senate building are not unusual, and 4 of them together is a wartime configuration that fits within the range of normal. Anakin counts the cameras. He knows which ones feed directly to the Chancellor's private security console, and which ones route through the building's central monitoring system. He knows because he spent years inside the architecture of Palpatine's security arrangements, years of being trusted. Years of being the man Palpatine sent into rooms to resolve problems, precisely because Anakin Skywalker moving through the Senate building registered to everyone who saw it as a solution arriving, rather than a threat. He is a threat now. He walks at normal pace with Ahsoka at his left shoulder and Mace Windu and Obi-Wan behind them, and he breathes through the force of the building's familiar weight, the smell of it, the specific quality of its recycled air, the way the light from the dome hits the upper corridor at this hour, and he does not allow the familiarity to become anything other than tactical information. Ahsoka is reading him. He can feel it, the gentle, constant presence of her attention through the training bond, not intrusive, just there, the same way it has been there since the steps outside the temple 7 weeks ago. She is checking, making sure the thing that has been growing darker in him since the moment they turned toward this building has not crossed a line she would need to address. It hasn't. He checks himself at the same time she does, and the check produces the same result. Grief, yes, and the particular cold focus of a man who knows exactly what is on the other side of the door he is walking toward, but no darkness, no reaching, nothing that would require her to step between him and what needs to happen in that office. She settles beside him. They walk. The door opens before they knock, not because Palpatine has been alerted, because he has always been alerted, because in all of Anakin's life and all of Vader's life, the one constant has been that Palpatine is never surprised by arrivals, only by the nature of them. The door opens and the aide inside takes one look at the composition of the group and goes pale in the particular way that people go pale when their bodies understand something their minds are still processing. Anakin walks past him. The inner office is exactly as he remembers it. The curved desk. The great windows overlooking the Senate dome, the city spreading beyond it in every direction. The sky above Coruscant doing its permanent impression of a sky that has forgotten what natural weather looks like. The chair behind the desk, turned away, facing the windows. The chair turns. Palpatine looks at them with the expression he keeps for unexpected visitors, warm, concerned. The benevolent elder statesman interrupted mid-thought. The performance so refined over so many decades that it has become entirely automatic, a mask that wears itself. His eyes move across the four of them with the practiced efficiency of a man who reads rooms the way other men read text. He reaches Anakin. He stops. Something moves behind his eyes. Not fear, not alarm, something more precise than both. Recognition of a variable. The recalibration of a model. A mind that has been running calculations on Anakin Skywalker for 25 years encountering a data point that does not fit any version of those calculations. Anakin, he says, and his voice is perfect, warm, familiar. The voice of a mentor greeting a proc. The voice of a man with nothing to hide. And Masters Windu and Kenobi. This is unexpected. We know who you are, Anakin says. The room changes, not dramatically, not with a visible shift in Palpatine's expression or a sudden movement, or any of the cinematic markers of a mask dropping. The change is subtler than that. A quality leaving the air, a temperature dropping by degrees, the specific sensation of being in a room where something has decided to stop pretending. Palpatine looks at Anakin for a long moment. Then he smiles. It is not the warm smile. It is the one underneath, older, precise, carrying no warmth whatsoever, the expression of a man who has waited his entire life to stop wearing the other one and finds the waiting finally over. "Do you," he says. "Darth Sidious," Mace says, behind Anakin. In the name of the Jedi Council, the Force lightning comes from both hands simultaneously. It does not build, it simply exists, the way a catastrophic system failure exists. No warning, no escalation. Full power from the first instant. The lightning fills the office in every direction, and the windows crack and the desk explodes into fragments, and the aide in the doorway is thrown back into the corridor by the displaced air pressure alone. Anakin is already moving. His hand comes up, both hands, and the lightning hits the field he's constructed between them and the source, and the sound it makes is enormous. A sustained roar of energy meeting resistance, and he pushes back against it with everything the Force will give him, and feels the strain immediately, because Palpatine at full power is not a thing that has a comfortable countermeasure. But he is not alone. Ahsoka's hands are beside his, not the same technique. She doesn't have the raw Force strength for direct containment at this scale. But she is feeding into the field at the edges, reinforcing the structure where it wants to collapse, filling the gaps that his containment creates. It is the same principle as the debris field in the throne room on Mandalore. Two separate fields, two separate minds, the same geometry. The lightning holds. Palpatine's eyes find Anakin's through the lightning. "You," he says, and his voice is a different instrument now, stripped of the warmth, stripped of the elder statesman, carrying the register that Anakin heard for the first time on an operating table in a Republic medical facility and spent 20 years hearing afterward. "You are not what you were." "No," Anakin says, through the effort of the hold. "What did you do?" And for the first time in all of Anakin's memory, all of Vader's memory, the first time across the full span of knowing this man, there is something in Palpatine's voice that is not controlled. "What did you do to yourself?" "I came back," Anakin says. Palpatine shifts the lightning, not at Anakin, sideways, into the wall to Obi-Wan's left, blowing a section of it out into the corridor beyond, and Obi-Wan rolls clear and comes up, and his blade is in his hand, and Mace is already moving around the perimeter, and the office is now a different geometry than it was 5 seconds ago, the clean lines of the room dissolving into wreckage and open air, and the distant sound of Coruscant far below through the gap in the wall. Palpatine is on his feet, moving backward, and from his robes come 2 sabers with curved hilts and red blades, the weapons of a man who has maintained combat readiness for decades of operating in plain sight. He ignites both, and the red light fills the office, and he is moving, and he is fast. Faster than the body should be at his age, because the body is not operating on biological energy anymore. Mace meets the first assault. Obi-Wan takes the second line. Anakin watches the geometry, reads the angles, and does not move yet, because the geometry is not right yet, and moving at the wrong moment is how this went wrong before, and he knows this, and he waits, and beside him Ahsoka waits with him, because she is reading him and trusting to read. "You think you've won," Palpatine says between exchanges, not breathless, precise, still managing his presence even now. His blades work against Mace's Vapod in the grinding mutual destruction of 2 systems that are built to absorb each other. "You've removed a piece. You haven't changed the board." "We removed the pieces that mattered," Ahsoka says. He looks at her. The girl. His voice finds the register he uses for things he intends to take apart. "He kept you." All of this, the anomaly, the disruption, it traces back to you staying. You are the variable. A pause, perfectly timed, delivered between strikes. What does that feel like, knowing everything that follows from one girl staying in a place she didn't belong? Ahsoka doesn't answer. She looks at the geometry, and the geometry is right. And she looks at Anakin, and Anakin is already moving. The Force push takes Palpatine in the center of his chest, not the controlled structural push from the warehouse, full extension, both arms, everything available in a single directed application. And the difference between this and anything Palpatine has modeled for Anakin Skywalker is that there is no anger in it, no darkness feeding the output. It is clean Force application at maximum scale, and it crosses the office in the time it takes to blink. Palpatine catches it. He is good enough to catch it. The shields he maintains are not decorative, but catching it costs him both sabers, costs him his footing, costs him the line he was holding against Mace, and Mace is already through the gap, Vapad flowing into the opening with the specific momentum of a fighting form that is built to route an opponent's own force back through them. Palpatine goes back. Ahsoka is there. She comes in from his left with both blades in the scissor configuration that Anakin drilled with her for 3 weeks on Coruscant. The configuration that addresses the exact defensive posture that Palpatine's training would produce in the moment of being driven backward, and he cannot be in 2 places, and he chooses wrong. And Mace's blade takes both of his simultaneously in a bind that strips them from his grip, and Anakin's hand closes on the Force around him. The pin is total. Palpatine stands in the wreckage of his office, disarmed, held, the lightning gone, the mask gone, nothing left between the room and whatever has always been underneath it. He breathes. His eyes move across the 4 of them with the expression of a man who is still calculating, who will always be calculating, who does not possess the mechanism for stopping. He looks at Anakin last. "You should have been magnificent," he says. Quietly, meaning it, in whatever way Palpatine is capable of meaning anything. "I was," Anakin says. Just not yours. He closes his fist. Palpatine falls. The office is very quiet. Through the gap in the wall, Coruscant moves in its permanent way, the city beneath the city beneath the city, indifferent and vast, carrying its billions in complete ignorance of the thing that just ended in a room above them. Ahsoka stands in the debris and breathes. Obi-Wan lowers his blade. Mace looks at Palpatine's crumpled figure for a long moment. Then he looks at Anakin, at Ahsoka, at the two of them standing in the wreckage they made together, sabers down, neither one of them in the darkness, both of them still exactly what they were when they walked through the door. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. The lake at Varikino does not change. It is one of the few things on Naboo that resists the planet's tendency toward spectacle. No cascading waterfalls, no bioluminescent blooms, no particular drama in the light at any hour, just water, and the low hills surrounding it, and the way the morning comes in slowly over the eastern ridge and finds the surface of the lake before it finds anything else, turning it from black to silver to the pale gold that means the day has properly begun. Anakin watches it from the garden wall. He is sitting on the stone with his feet on the outside edge, the way he has been sitting for 20 minutes. Because the children will be up soon, and this is the part of the morning that belongs to no one but him. The 15 minutes between the lake going gold and the sound of bare feet on the tile inside, which is the sound that ends the silence and begins everything else. He looks at his hands, both of them. Flesh to the fingertip, no seam at the wrist where the mechanical begins, no difference in temperature between left and right. He has been doing this for 4 years, checking, confirming, the habit of a man whose body spent 2 decades being a different body, who still reaches for reassurance that the reassurance is real. It is real. The lake says so. The morning says so. The sound coming through the open window behind him, small and unconscious and belonging to a child who has not yet learned that sleep has an ending. That says so most of all. The war ended without a signal. That was the strangest part. Not a moment, not a battle, not a single day that history would later agree on as the turning point. The Senate convened an emergency session with a Sith Lord and restraints in the lower chamber, and the evidence of 60 years of manufactured crisis laid across the floor of the rotunda, and the war did not end so much as exhale. The separatist command structure, deprived of its hidden director, fractured within a month. The clone army, deprived of its hidden instruction, simply continued being what the clones had always been beneath the chips. Soldiers who wanted the same things everyone wants, who had names they gave each other, who had preferences and complaints and loyalties that no one had manufactured. Rex retired to Mandalore. He sent a transmission on the day he arrived. 6 words. No context required. The brothers are doing fine, sir. Anakin read it twice and put it away and didn't respond for 3 days, because the response kept coming out wrong, kept being too much, and Rex deserved the right words. When he finally sent them, Rex responded in under a minute. That was enough. The order reformed slowly and without consensus, which meant the reformation was real. Yoda convened the first of the new councils 6 months after Palpatine's fall, and what came out of it was not a new set of rules, but a new set of questions. The kind of questions that only get asked when the old answers have been tried and found wanting. The attachment doctrine did not vanish overnight. But the conversations that had been forbidden for 1,000 years began. Quietly. In chambers where masters who had buried their own griefs and called it wisdom, found themselves looking at the evidence of what the burying had cost. Ahsoka sat on the first new council. Not because she was asked, because she showed up. In the chair that had always been hers by competence, if not by the Order's earlier willingness to say so. And no one in the chamber had the standing to suggest she leave. She sat there with her white blades at her hip and her history on her face, and she asked the questions that needed asking. And she listened to the answers. And when the answers were insufficient, she said so without apology. She is very good at this. Anakin did not sit on the council. He submitted his resignation from active Jedi service on the same day the new council was announced, in a letter that was 3 paragraphs and entirely without drama, and Master Yoda received it, and sat with it for a long time, and then responded with a single line that Anakin has kept. Earned, this piece is. Take it. Leia finds him on the wall. She is 4 years old and she does this. Materializes in places without announcing herself. Appearing at his elbow or behind his shoulder with the silent purposefulness of a child who has decided where she is going and does not see the need to narrate the journey. She is wearing the expression she gets when she has been awake for longer than the adults know, working something out. She climbs up beside him on the wall. He steadies her without looking. His hand finds her arm before she reaches for it. The reflex of a man who has been catching her since she learned to pull herself upright. She settles beside him and looks at the lake with the focused attention she brings to things she has decided to take seriously. The water is gold, she says. In the morning it does that, he says. She considers this. Why? The angle of the sun. The way it hits the surface. She looks at the lake for another moment, apparently running the physics of this and finding it acceptable. Then, she looks at his hands, which she does sometimes, the same check he runs, though she doesn't know that's what it is. Your hands are cold, she says. It's early. She takes his left hand in both of hers and holds it the way she holds things she has decided to take care of, with the complete and unconscious authority of someone who has never been told that this is not her job. The warmth transfers. He looks at her profile, the set of her jaw, the quality of attention in her eyes, the specific way she sits that is already entirely her own, and will be entirely her own for the rest of her life, and the thing that moves through him is not grief. It is the absence of grief. He has been waiting to notice when that happened, and it happened without announcement. The way things that heal properly heal, not dramatically, not in a moment, but in the gradual accumulation of mornings that were simply mornings, and hands that were simply warm, and a child who needed him to be present more than she needed him to be anything else. Luke finds him next. He takes longer because he moves loudly, and then stops moving loudly the moment he thinks he might be approaching something that requires quiet, a courtesy he developed entirely on his own at some point in the last year, and applies with considerable sincerity and inconsistent accuracy. He appears in the garden doorway, in his sleeping clothes, and his hair still carrying the shape of the pillow. And he looks at Anakin and Leia on the wall, and his face does the thing it does, the thing that is all his mother, the specific quality of relief that surfaces when he finds people he was looking for. He crosses the garden and climbs up on Anakin's right side without ceremony. For a moment, all three of them sit on the wall and look at the lake going gold, and nobody says anything. And the morning moves at its own pace around them, and the sound of Padam in the kitchen reaches them through the open window, the particular rhythm of someone who knows where everything is, and moves through a space with the efficiency of ownership. Luke leans against Anakin's arm. Anakin doesn't move. Luke is 4 and still does this without self-consciousness, and Anakin has been told by people whose opinions he respects that the self-consciousness will come, that there will be a day when this particular physical ease with its parent evaporates and becomes something more guarded, something 4-year-old boys are taught by the world to want. He has been told this and filed it in the category of information he has received and chosen not to anticipate, because anticipating it takes something from the mornings that are still exactly this. Is Ahsoka coming today? Luke asks. This afternoon, Anakin says. Luke makes the sound of a person for whom this afternoon is an acceptable answer but not a preferred one. She arrives when the sun is fully up, which on Naboo means the garden is warm and the lake is blue and the shadow of the eastern hills has retreated to somewhere it won't bother anyone until evening. She comes through the front gate with her white blades at her hip and a traveling pack over one shoulder, and the look she gets when she has been on a transport for 6 hours and has decided to be gracious about it. Padme meets her at the gate. The two of them stand there for a moment doing the thing they do, a conversation Anakin cannot hear from the garden, quick and specific. The shorthand of two people who have developed their own language through repeated proximity and mutual respect. Padme laughs at something. Ahsoka gestures in a direction that might be the lake, or might be Anakin specifically, and Padme looks across the garden and finds him watching and raises an eyebrow with the expression that is entirely her own and entirely devastating. He looks away. He looks at the lake. The children take Ahsoka to the courtyard. This is established procedure now. She arrives, and within 4 minutes one of them has taken her hand, and the other is already narrating the developments in the courtyard that have occurred since her last visit, and by the time she reaches the training posts she has been fully briefed, and is already adjusting her lesson plan accordingly. She is very good at this too. Anakin stands in the doorway to the garden and watches her crouch to Luke's level and listen to something with the focused attention she brings to everything. The attention that says, "I hear you," not as a courtesy, but as a fact. Leia is demonstrating something with a training saber that is approximately the right size for her, and approximately 3 technique levels above where it should be, which Ahsoka receives with the expression of a teacher who has been here before. The sun is on all of them. Anakin leans against the doorframe. No armor, no respirator, no weight except his own, which is the weight of a man in the morning in a garden, which is the weight of everything and nothing, which is exactly enough. He closes his eyes. He breathes in. The sound of his children in the courtyard reaches him. Laughter, the light collision of training sabers. Ahsoka's voice saying something that produces a sound from Luke that is almost certainly indignation. He breathes out. For the first time in the full span of his life, across every version of it he has lived, and the one he chose not to live again, there is nothing left to grieve. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.